Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
In the sci-fi film 2001: A Space Odyssey, Hollywood mined our fears of machines taking over mankind. But some of the tech world's greatest minds worry it may not be pure science fiction. At a speech last year at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, SpaceX and Tesla CEO Elon Musk called artificial intelligence potentially, quote, our biggest existential threat.
I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, you sure you can control the demon? Didn't work out.
Famed physicist Stephen Hawking is also worried, as is Microsoft founder Bill Gates, who ironically helped lay the foundation for artificial intelligence, or AI. Experts say machines are still far from being as intelligent as humans, but things can change quickly.
The field is progressing very rapidly right now. There are things happening that 10 years ago we would have said, no, there's no way we're going to be that far along in 10 years' time.
Self-driving cars is one example, voice recognition another. But in the near term, what worries Russell and other AI experts are robotic weapons, machines that can function entirely without the guidance of humans, known as fully autonomous weapons. According to a report by Human Rights Watch and Harvard Law School, they don't yet exist, but the technology is there for them to be developed. They are urging the United Nations to ban these weapons. Musk and others would like to see the entire field of artificial intelligence regulated to control the way it is implemented.
What we have to do is to make sure that if we ever succeed in making machines that smart, they had better be 100% on our side, not 99% on our side, because we don't want a 1% loophole, which could lead to the human race, as it were, losing the chess game.
Hidden away in the hills above Fukushima, the village of Katsurao doesn't get many good days, but this is one of them. A blessing from a Shinto priest at the opening of a new rice cake factory fulfills the dream of Hisako Matsumoto. Her original family-run business had to be abandoned when they were forced to leave after the nuclear disaster 6 years ago.
I've been looking forward to this for so long, and finally it came true.
But when production starts, they will be using rice from outside the village. The local rice fields are now filled with mounds of radioactive topsoil from the surrounding area. But at least it's a sign of hope.
Less than 10% of people have moved back. I'm one of them. Gradually we are restoring more houses, so we are expecting more people this year.
Much of the area within 20 kilometers of the nuclear plant was evacuated after the disaster. Gradually over the years, people have been allowed to return to some parts as restrictions have been lifted, and it's planned that more areas will be given the all clear this spring. But the discovery of high levels of radiation in one of the damaged reactors at Fukushima is a reminder that the problem is far from resolved. Engineers have been using robots to try to precisely locate the nuclear fuel that needs to be extracted from the reactors. A robot sent into reactor number 2 recorded radiation levels that would deliver a fatal dose to a human in less than 1 minute. It was enough to kill the robot, which broke down. That's raised concerns about how and when robot technology will be ready and able to extract the fuel safely.
It's a lot harder than they thought. The radiation level is 20 times greater than expected, and the robot cannot survive in that.
Back in the village of Katsurao, people have concerns of their own. With no school, shops or clinic, it's hard for families to return, and the fear is younger people may never come back.
Now, Australia authorities are to kill over 1 million kangaroos this year to protect the country's environment. While kangaroos have long been a national symbol of Australia, their growing population is threatening the country's ecosystem. Kangaroos can also turn violent when their habitat overlaps with urban areas. Experts say that the killing would not drive the animal to extinction, while opponents argue that the call is a needless slaughter.
The United Arab Emirates announces plans to build a city on Mars by 2117. One Emirati official says the city will be about the size of Chicago with a population of around 600,000. UAE Vice President Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum made the announcement February 14th at the World Government Summit in Dubai. He says the city will be a collaboration with other countries around the world and will be governed with UN involvement. Concrete steps at this point include starting space sciences programs at universities to inspire and train younger generations. Maktoum also says they will establish an Emirati science team that will work with scientists internationally. This team will develop faster transportation to and from Mars and research self-sustaining sources of food, energy, and transportation. The Emirati Space Agency, established in 2014, is currently working to send an unmanned probe to Mars by 2021.
A medieval skeleton helping unravel the mystery of a debilitating disease. These bones of a pilgrim found in a leprosy cemetery outside Winchester in England are challenging our understanding of history.
We are starting to understand kind of how leprosy spreads, the fact that it's actually stayed pretty constant as a disease. The DNA of leprosy has not really changed over the centuries. So it suggests that we have changed in response to it.
Found in a man-shaped grave, buried with some ceremony, the skeleton underwent genotyping, radiocarbon dating and biomolecular analysis. In the grave with him, proof he made the pilgrimage to the shrine of St. James in Spain. The scallop shell, the badge of Santiago de Compostela, where he probably contracted his disease.
It strongly suggests that in this case, pilgrimage may have been a conduit for leprosy. Certainly the individual had early stage leprosy. We don't know whether he died of leprosy, but he certainly would have had it. It would have affected his feet. And the second important part of this research is, what is a pilgrim doing within a leprosy cemetery? Because if we believe our traditional historians, we're told that leprosy sufferers were outcast, the hospitals loomed on the edges of cities. These individuals were treated very much as low status, akin to criminals in the medieval period.
Leprosy may be one of the oldest diseases known to medical science, but there are still hundreds of thousands of new cases every year. Health workers fearing a centuries-old stigma may be holding people back from reporting the now easily curable condition.
ISIL is challenging Egypt. The 20-minute video clip shows priests criticizing Muslims, and the militants appear to be using this as justification for targeting Christians.
It's an attempt to spread division among Egyptian Muslims and Christians. The videos of priests are from several TV shows, and the speeches during Coptic protests. Those were particular circumstances. ISIL is trying to ignite sectarian violence in the country.
A masked militant called Abu Abdullah al-Masri appears in the video. The group claims he is responsible for killing dozens of worshippers at a Coptic cathedral in Cairo in December.
Since Mohammed Morsi was overthrown in 2013, militant attacks have significantly increased in Egypt. Their main target has been the Egyptian army and police force. Recently, members of the judiciary have joined the hit list. It's a fertile environment for ISIL's trust and expansion. And the group has warned that the attack on this church won't be the last.
However, some security experts are confident that Egypt is capable of dealing with this threat.
Egyptian intelligence and the National Security Bureau are among the strongest in the world. I have no doubt Egyptian security forces will be able to confront and terminate this threat. We cannot stop crime, but we can limit it. And the current capabilities of the Egyptian security forces indicate that they can easily limit this new threat.
ISIL's warning isn't directed only at Christians. The group is pitting itself against almost all the country's political groups. Beside Egypt's security forces and President el-Sisi, ISIL has described the Muslim Brotherhood, former President Mohammed Morsi, and other Islamist organizations as tyrants and infidels.
Iraqi security forces have engaged in heavy gun battles with Daesh terrorists south of the western side of Mosul. Iraqi troops have entered the last village before the city's airport. Iraq's federal police clashed with the Takfiri group around the village of Abu Saif. A heavily armed paramilitary force is trying to take control of a strategic hill overlooking Mosul airport. The Iraqi Air Force is backing the offensive in a village with helicopters firing rockets on Daesh defense lines. On Sunday, Baghdad announced the start of the offensive to retake Iraq's second largest city from Daesh. Government forces have already liberated the eastern half of Mosul. Recapturing the entire city would be a major victory in the fight against Daesh in Iraq.
Japan's military has held its first overseas military drill in Thailand. Japanese media report around 100 soldiers from the self-defense forces took part in the exercise on Sunday at the Utapao Navy base, together with troops from the U.S. and Malaysia. The drill concentrated on a scenario in which troops were sent to rescue Japanese and U.S. nationals from a foreign location. It was the first overseas drill for Japan's military since restrictions on military operations outside its territory were eased when a new security law came into force in 2015. The drill was part of the multilateral joint exercise Cobra Gold, which involves 29 countries.
The U.S. Navy has deployed an aircraft carrier and a guided missile destroyer to the South China Sea. The Pentagon announced Saturday, February 18th that the USS Carl Vinson and the USS Wayne E. Meyer were sent to the South China Sea on, quote, routine operations. The move comes despite warnings from Beijing not to challenge its sovereignty. A spokesman for China's foreign ministry said of the deployment, quote, Beijing firmly opposes any country's attempt to undermine China's sovereignty and security in the name of the freedom of navigation and overflight. According to Navy Times, the U.S. Navy plans to sail within 12 nautical miles of China's newly built artificial islands in the South China Sea, a move which would amount to a challenge to Beijing's maritime claims in the region. The U.S. military has deliberately sailed close to Chinese-occupied islands at least 4 times since October 2015.
Elsewhere, Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, the IRGC, has launched major military drills in the central parts of the country. The 3-day Great Prophet 11 maneuvers kicked off with the participation of different IRGC units. Early on Monday, the forces fired advanced smart rockets at mock enemy positions in the first phase of the drills. The maneuvers aim to display the defense capabilities of the IRGC forces against probable foreign threats. Iran has made great achievements in its defense sector and reached self-sufficiency in producing essential military equipment and systems. The Islamic Republic has always assured other countries, especially the regional neighbors, that the defense doctrine is merely based on deterrence and poses no threat to any nation.
Police in the Guinean capital Conakry used tear gas on crowds of students. Groups of protesters armed with stones attacked a police station and looted stores and gas stations.
We are not demonstrating against anyone in particular, and this is not a political protest, but it's just because the government has closed schools for no reason. People don't have work, no school. That is why we are protesting.
The government officially shut down all schools across the country last week, but many classes had been cancelled for weeks. It all started last month when the government dismissed or reduced the salaries of contracted junior teachers who are not full-time employees. On February 1st, Guinea's 2 largest teachers' unions went on strike to protest the move. They are asking the junior teachers be rehired. They also want higher salaries for themselves.
We are not asking to be billionaires. We are not looking to be rich. We only want to have a decent life and be able to make a living and take care of our children. If education is destroyed, then the future of Guinea will be buried.
Strikes have been major disruptions for Guinea. A general strike over wages and pensions shut down the capital city last year for 4 days. And 10 years ago, another general strike left more than 100 people dead. There is fear an unresolved teachers' strike could lead to more violence.
Just 2 years after gaining independence in 2011, civil war erupted in South Sudan. President Salva Kiir accused his rival Riek Machar of plotting to overthrow him. Rebel factions seized control of towns, thousands were killed, and many more fled. A ceasefire was signed in January 2014, but was repeatedly broken. Negotiations failed to end the violence. By April, more than 1 million people had been displaced. Then a fugitive, Machar was charged with treason. In August 2014, peace talks began in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa. They too failed. The following year, general elections slated for June were called off. In April 2016, Machar returned home and was sworn in as Kiir's vice president as part of a unity government. Later that year, he was sacked following renewed fighting and fled once again. Over the years, the ongoing political violence has devastated food production.
There is officially a famine in South Sudan, and that means people are already dying of starvation. Several UN agencies warn roughly 100,000 people are currently at risk of starvation, and another 1 million are on the brink of famine. The root of the problem isn't weather or climate. This crisis is man-made. South Sudan has been riled with conflict for decades. It has also struggled with skyrocketing inflation. The country declared independence from Sudan in 2011, but disputes over issues like oil have kept tensions high. Various aid convoys have helped reduce the risk of starvation since the beginning of the South Sudanese conflict, but recently the local government and rebels have impeded their relief. This is the first famine declaration since 2011. In that crisis, an estimated 260,000 people in Somalia died between October 2010 and April 2012.
Tourists still pose for pictures in front of it, but behind the closed gates, the iconic Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro lies abandoned and left to ruin. Just 6 months after the Olympics, its famous pitch is bare, broken seats have been ripped out, as there's no money for maintenance. This is just one example of a state near bankruptcy. Corruption scandals and an economic recession is affecting the entire country, but things are particularly bad here. Former Governor Sergio Cabral is accused of stealing tens of millions of dollars from public construction programs, among them the renovation of the Maracanã. During the Olympics, the city was really trying hard to keep things together, but the minute the games were over, everything started to fall apart. The public university, usually brimming with students, is empty. With no money to pay professors, classes have not started.
It's a very sad situation. We need to graduate and work. Our families can't support us forever.
While at this public hospital, patients are sent back for lack of doctors.
I feel impotent. I have neurotoxoplasmosis and have been waiting for 7 months to do a head scan. I need to be treated.
To respond to the crisis, the state government is considering a series of austerity measures, which would cut pensions, jobs, and privatize publicly owned companies. They've been met with growing protests, some of which have turned violent. Fearing a possible police strike, the federal government sent thousands of soldiers to patrol the streets just days before its famous carnival is set to begin.
And we are facing the same kind of difficult situation that many countries in Western Europe suffered in the last years. Countries such as Greece, Spain, and Portugal. But Brazil is much poorer than these nations. We don't have the same social protection network that they have. So we are discussing a situation where people won't have school, public security, where they're going to die at public hospitals.
Rio remains the beautiful city that tourists can't help but fall in love with. But for those living here, it seems once again a place where dreams of greatness end in failure.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has asked his American counterpart Donald Trump not to be swayed by lobbies in the U.S. to adopt a hostile policy towards Caracas.
President Donald Trump, you're being paid million-dollar amounts in corridors and offices from the White House, the State Department, and the Treasury Department, from the lobbies to entangle you and lead you to an incorrect policy of aggression against Venezuela. Open your eyes.
Maduro underlined that his country does not agree with many of Washington's political doctrines and practices, but he said that Venezuela wants a relationship with the White House based on an equal footing, respect, communication, dialogue, and peace. Venezuela and the United States have had strained relations over the past years. Caracas has repeatedly accused Washington of using allegations of drug trafficking, corruption and human rights abuses as pretext to interfere in the internal affairs of the South American country.
Vitaly Churkin, Russia's longtime ambassador to the United Nations, has died suddenly at the age of 64. The Russian mission to the UN says Churkin was working in his office when he fell ill and later died. An exact cause hasn't been identified yet. Churkin's tenure at the United Nations began in 2006, capping a diplomatic career of more than 30 years. His strong defenses of Russia's interests, particularly on matters like the Syrian conflict, often led him to spar with the United States on the UN floor.
Is there no act of barbarism against civilians, no execution of a child that gets under your skin, that just creeps you out a little bit?
What I find very strange was the statement by the US representative who built her statement as if she was Mother Teresa.
But Churkin was well respected by his colleagues as a skilled diplomat and negotiator. His death was marked by a moment of silence during a UN General Assembly meeting.
We've lost one of the most respected and influential members of the UN family. And I can say with confidence that his name's going to live on in the annals of this organization's.
New details about that powerful storm now battering parts of the South, including a possible tornado touching down in Texas. The damage is evident. Casey Stiegel's on that live in our newsroom in Dallas. And what happened there, Casey?
Well, Bill, the National Weather Service is telling us that it was a possible tornado that touched down not only in one part of San Antonio, but in and around various parts of the city. Happened in the overnight hours. We know that's dangerous while many people are sleeping. Emergency officials say more than 150 homes have been damaged, but so far no reports of any serious injuries. This, as record rain also hammered the area, causing some flooding issues. So as you can imagine, first responders have their hands full.
They initiated a rapid search for any potential victims, keeping in mind structural integrity on a lot of the structures that were damaged. A lot of roofs were blown off of homes, trees uprooted, cars moved around.
And the wicked weather not over just yet. Severe storms now moving through Houston, Texas this morning. In fact, this is the same system that moved through San Antonio, causing that damage. So forecasters down in Houston watching this closely as teams with the National Weather Service will be on the ground this morning. Once the sun is up surveying the damage, they go in after these storms, as you know, to determine if a tornado was in fact responsible, and if it was, how strong that tornado was.
More to come on that. Thanks, Casey Stiegel, updating us on that weather condition there.
A large area of high pressure has kept those western storms from traveling east, so much of America is getting a preview of spring. Over the weekend, the eastern half of the country saw record highs. Dean Reynolds has that.
February in Chicago. No, really, it's February in Chicago. People are outdoors playing golf or tennis. They're biking, they're jogging.
Great day for a boat ride.
They're boating, and not on an icebreaker. From here all the way north to Canada, balmy is the word. Deb Mudge and Mark Aho of Worcester, Mass. celebrated their 12th anniversary away from New England snow.
What did you anticipate you were going to see? Or
piles of snow and ice.
This is a region where walking the dog in winter is usually a painful necessity for man and beast. Just a couple of years ago, a correspondent modeled more traditional February attire.
Kind of a cross between Nanook of the North and Yosemite Sam.
Ducks are swimming, the sap is running, and unfortunately for this guy, the ice is melting. One factor in the warm-up is snow. It normally acts like a land-based refrigerator, but for more than 2 months, Chicago hasn't had one measurable inch of the stuff. Pete Boland is visiting from England.
No, I did pack an awful lot of thermal underwear and thick coats in anticipation of a Chicago winter, and of course it hasn't proved to be the case.
If you cook at home regularly, you might want to listen up. We could be facing a global shortage of olive oil. The three countries that produce the bulk of olives and olive oil, Spain, Greece, and Italy, have been suffering from drought, floods, bugs, and bacteria. Prices have been rising. The shortage comes at a time when olive oil is already in high demand, in part due to a huge new market in China. This shortage hasn't hit U.S. wallets yet, thanks in part to the strength of the American dollar. But in places like the UK, where the uncertainty of Brexit has caused a massive fluctuation in the value of the pound, the shortage is making a bigger impact. By the end of the year, the price of a bottle of olive oil could increase by up to 1/3.
Knock on wood that your phone never crashes, but if it does, cosmic radiation could be to blame. Researchers at Vanderbilt say electrically charged particles raining from the sky can be a surprisingly big problem for personal devices, and the problem is growing. The cosmic rays we're talking about don't come from the sun, but from outside our solar system. These rays hit Earth's atmosphere, creating subatomic particles. Millions of these hit your body every second without any known side effects, but electronics are a different story. Because some cosmic particles have a charge, they can mess with the device's circuitry and stored data. Fixing this kind of problem for your phone may require a hard reset, which could be a personal nightmare. The fact that transistors and computers keep getting smaller could raise the risk of cosmic rays interfering with circuitry. The researchers also note that particles have more potential targets since there are more and more computers in our society. We're relying on computers more too. While cosmic rays may seem bad for your personal devices, they've actually caused more serious problems in the past. Researchers suspect the rays changed a single binary digit in a Belgian voting machine in 2003, giving a local candidate 4,000 extra votes. And in 2008, rays may have caused a plane's autopilot system to malfunction. The plane dropped 690 feet in less than 30 seconds, injuring a third of the people on board.